Hey, what's up, Superdads? So today we're going to be talking about whether obesity is a choice. This is a topic that's popped up recently in the YouTube fitness space, and it's one that I feel like hasn't really been done justice by just about anyone I've seen speak on it. I think sort of both camps are missing some stuff, and I'm going to address that in this video. So the two camps that I'm talking about here are one, the compassion crusaders, who basically are going to blame everything that ever happens in a person's life on things that are outside of their control, and tell people that it's not up to them whether they are obese or not, and the system has to change, or it's all uh, you know racism or classism or whatever ism you want to say, something that's holding them down. Okay, and so I'll start with them. Now, they tend to hear this question, is obesity a choice, and say, well, it's not that simple. It's not a yes or no question. There's so many more factors in play here. It's a complex phenomenon that emerges out of the interplay of all sorts of different elements if they're trying to sound smart. And they are right that it is a complex phenomenon and that there's a whole system of interdependent factors that play into obesity as a trend, a social trend, or in an individual's life just as much. That's true. However, as true as that is, it's an unsophisticated answer to the question of whether obesity is a choice. Just because a system in which we are embedded is complex in nature, it doesn't mean that we are powerless as actors within that system. Quite to the contrary, if you understand complexity, you would also understand that it basically just means that there is a lot of interdependency in the system. And because of all of this interdependency, there are also going to be very effective leverage points, places where you can make a small change and get a huge return within that system. So, an example for somebody who's obese would be resistance training. Taking up resistance training, high intensity resistance training that is really going to build them some muscle, as an example, is a relatively small lifestyle change. It only requires a couple minutes a week of dedicated, exercise. But the cascade effects of it would be huge. It's a high leverage activity because it's going to increase their metabolism, because it's going to change their hunger signaling, it's going to change their nutrient partitioning, it's going to change how people around them treat them, it's going to over time affect the behavior of those people around them through network contagion. And so, quite to the contrary of saying that, because this is such a complex phenomena, we're powerless in its hands. A complex system can actually make you a more powerful actor if you choose the right decisions or the right places to employ your choices, those leverage points. So what I would say to the compassion crusaders is that compassion is a noble, it's noble in its intention very often, not always, but very often. But that doesn't mean that excess compassion in its effects can't be cruel. If you're telling people that things are out of their control, you're also telling them that they have no control over the things that they want to change in their lives. And that's not a helpful message. It's actually a cruel message. So there it is. On the other side, we have the camp that basically says, okay, obesity comes down to what you put into your mouth. If you don't put that stuff into your mouth, you wouldn't be obese. If you didn't make all those poor food choices, you wouldn't be obese now. And so their argument can be boiled down to there's a trump card here, and that trump card is you decide what goes into your mouth, and that's true, just like the other side was true. This one is also true, but it's also obviously overlooking a whole lot of stuff. Yes, your ability to choose what goes in your mouth is a trump card. Assume it is a trump card. However, not everybody has the same number of trump cards in their deck, and not everybody has the same number of cards in their deck. And some people just never have the luck of drawing a trump card. Now, that might sound crazy, or maybe the analogy is not landing, but okay, let's dig into a couple of those complex factors that the Compassion Crusaders are on about. There are things like the lack of good information out there. Like for decades, people have been told that, doing a bunch of cardio is going to help them lose fat, or they've been told, it's low carb or it's low fat, or right. There are so many mixed messages out there and so much confusion about what constitutes a sustainable, you know, change of lifestyle that it will, over the long term, result in keeping fat off. There's, just the cultural obsession with scale weight, and people who do anything to lose weight and end up losing muscle, which then sets them up to gain back more fat and to overshoot on the way back up. Right, so much bad information, and if you've been anywhere on YouTube in this fitness space, you know that this is true. How does somebody who is new to this know who to listen to, who's giving good information, and who is a charlatan or who's just trying to sell something, who is misguided in their attempt? All these, this is not. It's not that easy to parse. There are some things that sound good to me, and that end up being not true, even and I fall for them, even though I have so much experience and qualifications and all sorts of things in this space. Okay, there's things like the availability of decent food. If you live in a food desert and the nearest place to get some decent vegetables and some, animal protein that isn't highly processed is miles and miles away, and you need to take public transportation to get there because you don't have a car, but you have two kids to watch because, your whatever partner left you and you're working two jobs, and how are you going to do that? It's just not feasible. Is it a choice to buy a food from the fast food store around the corner, or the convenience store around the corner? Unhealthy food? Yes, it is a choice, but it's a choice made in the absence of any other. It's the best choice that that person can make in that situation. And so it might be a choice, and it might not be a good choice, but it might still be the best choice that you have available to you, realistically, right? There are deeply ingrained habits. People learn things when they are kids that stick with them. And those things are very hard to get rid of. And it's not like those people chose which habits their parents were going to teach them or ingrain in them. That wasn't up to them. There are things like network contagion effects. So just the people around you have a huge effect. If you want to guess whether somebody is obese without ever having met them, probably the best thing you could know about them is how many of their close friends and relatives are obese. And if you knew that, you'd probably be able to guess. You'd be able to win money all day betting on whether or not they were, because that's the effect that social networks have on us. Okay, and so the thing to recognize, and that's not at all an exhaustive list. The thing to recognize is that, if you were that person who was in that situation and had that knowledge and those habits, if you were that person, you would also be obese, right? If you were in the same situation, you would be in the same situation with regard to your weight. To think otherwise is just, I don't know where your brain is, right? And so some Greg Doucette talked about a burning building, right? He said it is a choice. It's like being in a burning building, and the doctor tells you that if you don't lose some weight, you're going to die. Well, that's the same as someone, you finding out that you're in a burning building, and you have a choice to either escape the burning building or not. And so, don't eat the food, continue eating, or go on a diet and lose some fat. Okay, I get the point of the analogy. It highlights the choice and the threat to your life posed by obesity. But what it overlooks is that for some people, the exit from that burning building is concealed. It's not easy to find, or maybe it's behind a bunch of dangerous or difficult to traverse stuff. And so somebody can attempt to get to the exit and still not succeed. And they can attempt again and still not succeed. Maybe they're going on YouTube and they're following fitness advice and they're trying to eat less, but what they end up eating less of is food that already doesn't have very many nutrients in it. And so now they end up, not only are they overweight, but now they're malnourished and overweight. And, that has an effect on how their brain processes food signals or hunger signals. At some point, they're fighting against their own body and its desire to stay alive against what it sees as the threat of famine. There are so many things working against this person, And I'll say it again, if you were in that situation, you would be in the same situation with regard to your weight. So, success in an endeavor, a difficult endeavor like losing fat, success isn't always up to the person. In fact, anywhere in your life, success isn't up to you. All that's up to you is the effort that you put into it. So, a better analogy than a burning building, in my opinion, is poverty. If somebody is deep in poverty, you could say, well, you just need to spend less money. That would be like saying you just need to eat less. But there are some times when a person needs to spend money. Like, what if they have the choice between, they can spend money to pay their taxes or they can go to jail? Well, okay, yeah, it's a choice. But spending the money that they need to spend to pay their taxes is the better of two bad choices for that person. So that's the one they're going to make. It's also very expensive to be poor. If you've ever been poor, you will know this. This is not a this is an illustrative example, but not perhaps not one that's common. But I live in Japan. I have an account in the United States. It doesn't have a whole lot of money in it. I don't use it that often, right? But because it doesn't have a lot of money in it, you know what happens? I get charged every month for having an account that doesn't have a lot of money in it. What the hell is that? That is basically a poor tax. It's expensive to be poor. There are 1,000 ways in which this is true. Well, it's also true for being overweight. It is fattening to be fat. So if you're a kid who grows up in the kind of environment that is obesogenic and you end up being fat, and hardly anyone blames kids, right? But for some reason, when we're 18 or 20 or whatever it is, suddenly people, flip a switch in their brain and they say, okay, now it's your fault. It wasn't your fault a day ago when you were still a kid, whenever they make that deadline or that cutoff point, right? If you're fat when you turn into an adult, well, it's fattening to be fat because fat, as an example, turns testosterone into estrogen through aromatization. And the more estrogen you have, the more easier it is to gain body fat. Okay, having excess body fat also changes your hunger signals. It changes your satiation signals. It changes how ghrelin and leptin work in your body. There are so many ways in which being fat can contribute to you becoming more fat. And so this is a much better example or analogy, I would say, than the burning building is poverty. So think about someone that you know, or the way you think about people who are in poverty. Would you just say, "Hey, you just need to save more money"? I mean, it's obviously not that simple. They can try as hard as they want to get out of poverty, and it just won't happen for some people. Okay, so those are the two camps. Those are how I think they're both right, but also they're kind of missing the point. So then, where do I stand on this? I am a determinist when it comes to the question of free will. So I don't think people actually have a choice about the things that happened in the past, the choices that they made. I think there was only ever one way that things were going to play out. And that's not the topic of the video, but it needs to be said because when it comes to the present, right, you don't have a choice over whether you're obese, right? If you are obese, the person who's listening to this, you can't just decide to stop being obese and the world is going to bend to your will. That's not how reality works. So, in that sense, is obesity a choice is a very poorly phrased or poorly framed question. Were there choices that led up to that contributed to your current state of being obese? Yes, you did things, let's say, that contributed to that. Could you have done otherwise? I don't really think so. I think you probably did the best that you could with what you had at the time, with what you knew and the capacities that you had and what was available to you. Now, that doesn't mean I don't think that you are responsible for where you go from here. So, in that sense, I'm being pragmatic. I'm well aware from personal experience and coaching and all of those things that believing that you have options and you are in charge, what is under your control, that you recognize that and behave accordingly, is the most pragmatic way to move towards the kind of person that you want to be in the future. So, what I'd like you to know is being obese is not a choice, but accepting obesity is. So if you're obese right now and you just say, "Well, there's nothing I can do about it," well, that is, you are choosing right now to feel that way, to accept your obesity and to not do anything about it. There is no room for shame in this conversation, and there's no room for blame in this conversation. This is where that second camp gets it all wrong, because it seems like they're saying it's your fault that you're obese. It's you're to blame for being obese. And neither of those things are helpful at all. Nobody gets better by being shamed. You are not responsible for where you are now, but you are responsible for your trajectory, for where you are going from now on. That is the mindset to keep. And that is, I suppose, the most helpful way to answer this question. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I hope that you got something out of this. Go be super. Thanks, everyone.